Jake Cooper's hand hovers over the medical bay's access panel, his heart pounding as he contemplates the unprecedented task before him, milking an alien girl to save her life. The sterile air of the remote military outpost on planet Nig weighs heavy with tension. Moments ago, the critically ill Nigerian female, Ava, arrived at the base. Her blue-tinted skin glistens with feverish sweat as she lies unconscious on the examination table, intricate bioluminescent patterns pulsing across her body with alarming intensity. The chief medical officer's words echo in Jake's mind. A rare condition is causing a toxic buildup in Ava's mammary glands. Without immediate intervention, she will die. The base commander's stern voice cuts through Jake's thoughts. Cooper, you understand the gravity of this situation? This isn't just about saving one life. Our entire alliance with the Nigerians hangs in the balance. Jake nods, acutely aware of the potential diplomatic fallout. The procedure he's about to perform is deeply taboo in Nigerian culture. No one else, human or alien, dared to step forward. But Jake couldn't stand by and watch Ava die, not when he had the power to help. I understand, sir, Jake responds, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility. I'll proceed with utmost discretion. The commander's eyes narrow. See that you do. Humanity's position in the interstellar community is precarious enough without an incident like this. As Jake enters the medical bay, the hiss of the closing door seals him in with Ava and the enormity of his task. Medical monitors beep urgently, displaying her rapidly declining vital signs. The chief medical officer hands Jake a set of specialized equipment, its sleek design a stark contrast to the dire circumstances. This is calibrated for Nigerian physiology, the doctor explains, his tone clipped. Extract the toxins without damaging the surrounding tissue. You have one shot at this, Cooper. Jake approaches Ava, studying her alien features. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulse faster, a visual representation of her body's distress. He takes a deep breath, steadying his hands as he positions the equipment. Time seems to slow as Jake begins the procedure. Each movement is deliberate, guided by a mix of his military training and a deep-seated desire to preserve life, even one so alien. The specialized extractor hums softly as it works, drawing out the toxic fluid that threatens Ava's existence. As Jake works, he can't help but marvel at the situation. Here he is, a human soldier on a distant planet, performing a procedure that could either save a life and strengthen intergalactic relations, or spark a diplomatic crisis that could jeopardize humanity's future among the stars. The monitors begin to stabilize, offering a glimmer of hope. Jake presses on, acutely aware that his actions in these critical moments could reshape the course of human-Nigerian relations. The fate of Ava, the delicate alliance between their species, and potentially humanity's place in the galaxy, all rest in his steady hands. The specialized extractor continued its soft hum as Jake carefully maneuvered it across Ava's blue-tinted skin. His eyes darted between the alien's face and the medical monitors, watching intently for any sign of change. Suddenly, a series of rapid beeps caught his attention. Vital signs stabilizing, Jake murmured, relief washing over him. The urgent beeping of the monitors slowed to a steady rhythm, matching Ava's gradually normalizing condition. As Jake worked, he couldn't help but notice the unique features of Nigerian anatomy. Ava's skin felt surprisingly smooth and firm under his touch, unlike anything he had encountered before. The intricate bioluminescent patterns that had been pulsing so frantically earlier now began to dim, their intensity fading as the toxins were extracted. Jake's scientific curiosity piqued as he observed the complex structure of Ava's mammary glands. They were larger and more intricate than human females, with a network of channels that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly glow. Despite the clinical nature of the procedure, Jake found himself oddly fascinated by the alien physiology. As the last of the toxic fluid was drawn out, Ava's eyelids began to flutter. Jake held his breath, watching as her large, iridescent eyes slowly opened. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as their gazes locked. An inexplicable connection formed between them, transcending the vast differences of their species. Ava's lips parted, and a series of soft, melodic clicks filled the air. Jake blinked, realizing she was trying to communicate. The medical bay doors hissed open, and Dr. Eliza Reese, the base's translator, hurried in. I came as soon as I heard she was regaining consciousness, she explained, moving to Ava's side. Dr. Reese listened intently to Ava's clicks and trills, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, she turned to Jake. She's expressing her gratitude. She understands that you volunteered to perform this procedure when no one else would. Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Tell her it was my honor to help. As Dr. Reese relayed Jake's words, Ava's expression shifted. The gratitude in her eyes mingled with embarrassment, and what Jake could only interpret as cultural shock. He realized she was likely grappling with the taboo nature of what had transpired. Outside the medical bay, the buzz of activity grew louder. Jake could hear snippets of conversation as personnel passed by, their tones ranging from admiration to concern. The implications of his actions were already rippling through the base. Colonel Blackwood's stern voice cut through the chatter. Cooper, a word. Jake stepped out of the medical bay, leaving Dr. Reese to tend to Ava. The colonel's face was a mask of hardly restrained tension. I've just received an urgent communication from Nigean High Command, Blackwood said, his voice low. They're demanding an immediate explanation of the incident. Jake's stomach dropped. Sir, Blackwood held up a hand, silencing him. Save it, Cooper. We'll deal with the fallout later. For now, the patient has requested to speak with you privately. Surprised, Jake nodded and re-entered the medical bay. Dr. Reese was helping Ava sit up, adjusting the examination table to a more comfortable position. She wishes to speak with you alone, Dr. Reese explained. I'll remain to translate, but she's requested that all other personnel clear the room. As the medical staff filed out, Jake approached Ava's bedside. Her iridescent eyes studied him intently, a mix of curiosity and something else he couldn't quite identify in their depths. Through Dr. Reese's translation, Ava began to speak. I am Ava, daughter of High Diplomat Zorn. My father sent me to this remote outpost to hide my condition. She paused, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with what Jake interpreted as embarrassment. The ailment you treated is the result of a rare genetic mutation, Ava continued. It affects a small percentage of Nigean females, causing our bodies to produce a potent compound. If not regularly released, it becomes toxic. Jake listened, fascinated by this glimpse into Nigean biology and culture. Why is the extraction procedure considered taboo? He asked. Ava's patterns pulsed softly as she replied. Ancient religious beliefs view the compound as sacred. The method of extraction is seen as profane. As their conversation continued, Jake found himself drawn to Ava in a way he had never experienced before. Her intelligence, the musical quality of her native speech, the way her bioluminescence seemed to dance with her emotions, it all captivated him. He noticed Ava's gaze lingering on him as well, and a spark of mutual attraction flickered between them. However, the reality of their situation quickly tempered any growing feelings. A Nigean diplomatic delegation is on its way, Jake informed her, his tone regretful. Your father is among them. Ava's patterns flared with alarm. This complicates matters significantly, she clicked, her agitation clear, even without translation. As they grappled with the potential consequences of their connection, alarms blared throughout the base. Colonel Blackwood's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. Attention all personnel. Nigean diplomatic shuttle approaching. Prepare for immediate arrival. Jake and Ava exchanged a look of apprehension, both aware that the true challenge was only just beginning. The alarms continued to blare as Jake and Ava exchanged apprehensive glances. The medical bay doors slid open, revealing Colonel Blackwood's tense figure. Cooper, we need you in the command center immediately. Ambassador Zorn and his delegation have just landed, Blackwood ordered, his voice tight with urgency. Jake nodded, turning to Ava. Will you be all right? Ava's bioluminescent patterns flickered with concern. I must face this, she clicked, her tenacity evident even through Dr. Reese's translation. As Jake hurried to the command center, he could feel the weight of every eye on him. The base was abuzz with activity, personnel rushing to prepare for the Nigean delegation's arrival. He entered the command center just as Ambassador Zorn and his entourage were being escorted inside. Ambassador Zorn, a tall, imposing figure with deep blue skin and intricate luminescent patterns, radiated authority and impossibly strong fury. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto Jake with an intensity that made the human soldier's spine stiffen. Colonel Blackwood stepped forward, his voice carefully measured. "Ambassador Zorn, welcome to our outpost. We understand your concern." "Concern?" Zorn's voice boomed, his translator barely keeping up with his rapid clicks and trills. "You have committed an act of cultural violation against my daughter and our people. I demand the immediate arrest and extradition of this human." Jake felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as Zorn pointed directly at him. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Colonel Blackwood's lips pursed. "Ambassador, with all due respect, Private Cooper's actions saved your daughter's life. She was in critical condition, a condition that is sacred to our people," one of the Nigerian officials interjected, his patterns flashing with indignation. As the argument intensified, the command center doors hissed open. All eyes turned to see Ava, supported by Dr. Reese, enter the room. Her luminescence pulsed weakly, but her eyes blazed with purpose. "Father," Ava's musical clicks filled the air, silencing the room. "You cannot punish this human for saving my life." Ambassador Zorn's patterns flickered with a mix of relief and confusion. "Ava, you don't understand the gravity of what has occurred." "No, Father," Ava interrupted, her voice growing stronger. "It is you who does not understand. For years I have suffered in silence, enduring pain that our outdated beliefs forced me to bear. This human, Jake Cooper, did what none of our people would do. He saw past our taboos and acted to preserve life." The Nigerian delegation shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances as Ava continued her impassioned speech. Jake watched in awe as she challenged centuries of Nigerian tradition, her bioluminescence pulsing with each emphatic statement. As Ava's words sank in, one of the Nigerian medical experts stepped forward, his patterns displaying a mix of curiosity and excitement. "Ambassador Zorn, if I may, this human's successful treatment of your daughter's condition could be groundbreaking. With your permission, we would like to study the procedure and its effects." A murmur rippled through the room. Ambassador Zorn's expression shifted, conflict evident in his alien features. The potential for scientific advancement warred with deeply ingrained cultural beliefs. While the Nigerian delegation debated among themselves, Major Sarah Chen approached Jake, her expression stern. "Cooper, we need to talk. Now." Jake followed her to a corner of the command center, acutely aware of the curious glances from both humans and Nigerians. "You understand the gravity of what you've done, soldier?" Major Chen's voice was low, her eyes searching Jake's face. "Your actions, while potentially life-saving, have put us in a delicate diplomatic situation. I need to know exactly what happened in that medical bay." As Jake recounted the events, he could hear the continued discussion between Colonel Blackwood and Ambassador Zorn. The tension in the room remained high, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The initial outrage was giving way to cautious curiosity. Suddenly, Ambassador Zorn's voice cut through the chatter. "Colonel Blackwood, I propose we continue this discussion in private. There is much to consider." As the senior officials filed out, Jake found himself at the center of attention once again. Some of his fellow soldiers clapped him on the back, praising his bravery, while others kept their distance, eyeing him warily. Amidst the commotion, Jake's gaze met Ava's across the room. The connection between them seemed to transcend the chaos surrounding them. Ava's luminescent patterns pulsed softly, conveying a message that needed no translation. As the day wore on, rumors spread throughout the base. Jake overheard snippets of conversation about potential breakthroughs in human-Nigerian relations, whispers of a joint medical research initiative, and darker murmurs of possible Nigerian retaliation. The uncertainty of the situation burdened immensely on Jake as he made his way back to his quarters. He knew that the next few days would be crucial, not just for him, but for the future of human-Nigerian relations. As he closed his door, shutting out the noise of the base, Jake couldn't help but wonder what challenges tomorrow would bring. As he closed his door, shutting out the noise of the base, Jake couldn't help but wonder what challenges tomorrow would bring. Sleep eluded him that night, his mind racing with the implications of his actions. When morning came, it brought with it a flurry of activity. Jake had barely finished his breakfast when Major Chen appeared at his door. "Cooper, gear up. We're going live in 30 minutes. Jake's heart raced as he donned his dress uniform. The base was a hive of activity, personnel rushing to prepare for the press conference. As he made his way to the designated area, he caught sight of Ava being escorted by Dr. Reese. Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange of support passing between them. The makeshift press room was packed with human and Nigean journalists, their varied forms creating a colorful tapestry of interested parties. Jake took his place on the raised platform, flanked by Ava, Colonel Blackwood, and Ambassador Zorn. The ambassador's luminescent patterns pulsed with scarcely controlled agitation. As Colonel Blackwood began his opening statement, Jake's attention was drawn to the commotion outside. Through the windows, he could see a growing crowd of protesters, both human and Nigean. Signs in multiple languages bobbed above the throng, some supporting the new cooperation, others decrying it as a betrayal of traditional values. Jake's turn to speak came sooner than he expected. He stepped up to the podium, the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. "What happened in that medical bay wasn't about humans or Nigeans," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It was about life, about seeing past our differences to recognize the value of every sentient being." As Jake continued his speech, he noticed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Even some of the more skeptical journalists leaned in, their expressions softening. Ava's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what he now recognized as pride and gratitude. Ava's testimony followed, her musical clicks translated in real time for the human audience. "For years I suffered in silence," she said, her patterns flickering with remembered pain. "The treatment I received here not only saved my life, but opened my eyes to the possibility of a future free from suffering." Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Jake's military instincts kicked in as he spotted a swarm of small, metallic objects pouring in through a vent. "Everyone down!" he shouted, leaping into action. The insect-like drones buzzed erratically, causing panic among the assembled press. Jake's eyes darted around the room, quickly assessing the situation. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and began spraying the swarm, the cold CO2 causing the drones to drop from the air. Security personnel rushed in, but Jake was already one step ahead. He noticed a pattern in the drone's movement and traced it back to a Nigean in the far corner, his patterns pulsing with agitation. Jake vaulted over a row of chairs, tackling the Nigean to the ground just as he was about to activate another wave of drones. In the aftermath of the attack, Jake found himself once again the center of attention. Ambassador Zorn approached him, his patterns displaying a complex mix of emotions. "Private Cooper," he said, his voice carrying a new note of respect, "it seems I owe you a debt of gratitude. Your actions today have demonstrated the true potential of human-Nigean cooperation." The ambassador's words marked a turning point. Over the next few days, negotiations between human and Nigean officials intensified. Jake found himself increasingly involved, his unique position as both a soldier and a bridge between cultures proving invaluable. During a rare moment of downtime, Jake and Ava found themselves alone in one of the base's observation decks. The swirling colors of NIG's atmosphere provided a breathtaking backdrop as they talked. "Jake," Ava said softly, her patterns pulsing with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "There's something I need to tell you." She hesitated, her large eyes searching his face. "My condition, it's recurring. I'll need regular treatments to survive." Jake felt a surge of protectiveness. "We'll figure it out," he assured her, resisting the urge to take her hand. The joint research facility they're planning could be the key to finding a permanent solution. As they stood there, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. An alarm blared through the base. Jake's comm unit crackled to life with Major Chen's voice. "Cooper, report to the brig immediately. We've got a situation." Jake arrived to find Major Chen standing over a group of restrained soldiers, her face grim. "We caught these men planning a preemptive strike against the Nigeans," she explained. "They believed the alliance was a threat to human interests." The discovery sent shockwaves through the base. Nigerian officials demanded the conspirators be handed over to face their justice system, while human command insisted on handling the matter internally. The fragile peace they had been building threatened to crumble. Amidst the rising tensions, Jake received an urgent message from Ava. Her condition was worsening, and she needed another treatment. This time, however, she requested that Jake perform the procedure alone, without the presence of medical staff. As Jake made his way to the secluded medical bay where Ava waited, his mind raced with the implications of what was about to happen. He knew that this moment could change everything, not just for them, but for the future of human-Nigerian relations. The medical bay doors slid shut behind him, leaving Jake and Ava alone in the sterile room. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the air as they regarded each other, both acutely aware of the weight of the moment. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with a mix of nervousness and commitment. "I trust you, Jake," she clicked softly. "More than anyone." As Jake began to prepare for the procedure, alarms suddenly blared throughout the base. Colonel Blackwood's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "All personnel, prepare for potential evacuation. This is not a drill." Jake and Ava exchanged a look of shock and dismay. The universe, it seemed, had other plans for them. With Ava's condition deteriorating and the base on high alert, they found themselves at a crossroads, their personal feelings colliding with the fate of two species. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he knew that the decisions made in this room would have far-reaching consequences. As he turned to the medical equipment, he couldn't help but wonder if he was about to save a life or start a war. Jake turned to the medical equipment, his heart racing. He knew what he had to do, but the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon him. Ava's luminescent patterns pulsed with a mix of anticipation and trust as she positioned herself on the medical bed. "I'm ready," she clicked softly, her large eyes fixed on Jake. Jake nodded, taking a deep breath to steady his hands. He began the procedure, acutely aware of Ava's every reaction. The intimacy of the moment was palpable, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. As Jake worked, his fingers brushing against Ava's alien skin, he found himself hyper-aware of their physical proximity. The soft glow of Ava's bioluminescence cast an ethereal light over the medical bay, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. The procedure progressed smoothly, Jake's movements becoming more confident with each passing moment. Ava's patterns shifted, displaying relief in something else, a warmth that seemed to radiate towards Jake. As Jake completed the final steps of the treatment, their eyes met. Time seemed to slow, the universe narrowing down to just the two of them in that moment. Without conscious thought, Jake leaned in closer. Ava's patterns pulsed rapidly, mirroring the quickening of Jake's pulse. Their lips met in a kiss that defied the boundaries of their species. It was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened with the release of long-suppressed feelings. Jake's hands cradled Ava's face, marveling at the soft warmth of her skin and the gentle pulsing of her bioluminescence. The kiss ended, leaving them both breathless. Jake opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. Ava's patterns swirled with a complex mix of emotions, joy, uncertainty, and a deep affection that needed no translation. Their moment of intimacy was shattered by the sudden blaring of alarms throughout the base. Jake jerked back, his military training kicking in instantly. Colonel Blackwood's voice crackled over the intercom, urgent and tense. "All personnel, we are under attack. This is not a drill. Prepare for immediate defensive action." Jake's mind raced, processing the sudden shift from intimacy to danger. He quickly helped Ava off the medical bed, his protective instincts surging to the forefront. "We need to move," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Can you walk?" Ava nodded, her patterns now pulsing with alarm. "Jake, what's happening?" Before he could answer, the door to the medical bay burst open. Major Chen rushed in, her face grim. "Cooper, we've got a situation. A group of Nigerian extremists has breached the outer defenses. They're targeting the research facility and—" Her eyes darted to Ava. "They're after her." Jake's face hardened. He quickly assessed their options, his training taking over. "We need to get Ava to a secure location. Major, what's our defensive posture?" We're mobilizing all available personnel, Chen replied, handing Jake a weapon. But we're outnumbered. The attackers are led by a radical named Kraz. They see our cooperation as a threat to their way of life. Jake nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He turned to Ava, his expression softening for a moment. I promise I'll keep you safe. Ava's patterns pulsed with commitment. I trust you, Jake. The trio moved swiftly through the corridors of the base, the sounds of battle growing louder. Jake led the way, his weapon at the ready, with Major Chen covering their rear. They encountered pockets of resistance, exchanging fire with Naijian extremists who had penetrated deep into the base. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of attackers. Jake reacted instantly, pushing Ava behind cover and opening fire. The air filled with the sharp crack of gunfire and the strange, high-pitched whine of Naijian weapons. We need to get to the command center, Chen shouted over the noise. Colonel Blackwood is coordinating the defense from there. Jake nodded, his mind racing. He spotted a maintenance access panel and quickly formulated a plan. This way, he called, prying open the panel. We can use the service tunnels to avoid the main corridors. As they crawled through the cramped tunnels, Jake's comm unit crackled to life. Colonel Blackwood's voice came through, strained and urgent. All units, be advised. We have confirmation that the extremists possess a bioweapon designed to target humans. Prevent deployment at all costs. Jake exchanged a grim look with Major Chen. The stakes had just risen exponentially. They doubled their pace, emerging from the tunnels near the command center. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos. Human soldiers and loyal Naijian security forces were engaged in fierce combat with the extremists. In the midst of the battle, Jake spotted Ambassador Zorn attempting to reason with a group of attackers. "Ambassador, get down!" Jake shouted, but his warning came too late. A stray shot caught Zorn in the shoulder, sending him crumpling to the ground. Jake made a split-second decision. He turned to Major Chen, his expression resolute. "Get Ava to the secure bunker. I'm going after the ambassador." Ava's patterns flashed with alarm. "Jake, no! It's too dangerous!" Jake met her gaze, conveying volumes in that brief moment. "I have to. He might be our only chance at maintaining peace after this." He squeezed her hand briefly. "I'll come back for you. I promise." With that, Jake plunged into the fray, dodging energy blasts and returning fire as he made his way to the fallen ambassador. He reached Zorn just as another wave of attackers rounded the corner. Jake dragged the ambassador behind cover, quickly assessing his wound. "Hang in there, sir," he said, applying pressure to the injury. "We're going to get you out of here." Zorn's patterns flickered weakly. "Cooper, you must stop Kraz. He doesn't understand the consequences of his actions." Jake nodded grimly. "I intend to, sir. But first, we need to get you to safety." As Jake prepared to move the ambassador, he caught sight of a familiar figure moving through the chaos. Kraz, the leader of the extremists, was making his way towards the research facility and the bioweapon. Jake found himself faced with an impossible choice. To his left, the injured ambassador needed immediate medical attention. To his right, Kraz was moments away from reaching a weapon that could annihilate the human presence on Nija. And somewhere in the base, Ava was waiting for him to return. Jake's grip tightened on his weapon as he made his decision, knowing that the fate of two species hung in the balance. Balance. In that split second, Jake made his choice. He lunged forward, tackling Kraz with all his might. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground, and the bioweapon container slipped from Kraz's grasp. Time seemed to slow as Jake watched the container hit the floor. The sickening crack of breaking glass filled his ears, followed by a hiss as a pale green mist began to seep out. "No!" Jake shouted, his voice raw with desperation. He scrambled to his feet, quickly assessing the situation. The deadly vapor was spreading rapidly, and he knew he had only moments to act. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Jake sprinted to the nearest control panel. His fingers flew over the keys, initiating the emergency containment protocols. Blast doors began to descend, sealing off the section of the base. Jake's eyes darted around the room, landing on Ava, who had followed him despite his instructions. "Ava, get out of here now!" he yelled, but it was too late. The final blast door slammed shut, trapping Jake, Ava, and the unconscious Kraz inside with the lethal bioweapon. The green mist swirled around them, growing thicker by the second. Jake felt his throat constrict as he took his first breath of the contaminated air. He stumbled towards Ava, his vision already beginning to blur. "Jake!" Ava's voice sounded distant, distorted. Her bioluminescent patterns flashed in alarm as she caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. Jake's body convulsed, his skin burning as if on fire. Through the haze of pain, he saw Ava's form beside him, her patterns pulsing erratically. But as the seconds ticked by, something unexpected happened. Ava's convulsions began to subside. Her patterns, which had been chaotic moments before, settled into a steady rhythm. She blinked, looking down at her hands in confusion. "Jake," she clicked, her voice tinged with wonder and fear. I think I'm immune." Despite the agony racking his body, Jake's mind raced. Ava's recurring condition, could it somehow be protecting her from the bioweapon's effects? Ava seemed to reach the same conclusion. Her large eyes widened with realization. "My condition, the compound in my body, it must be neutralizing the weapon." She sprang into action, her movements precise despite the chaos around them. Jake watched through increasingly unfocused eyes as Ava rushed to a nearby medical station, grabbing supplies with lightning speed. "Hang on, Jake," she urged, her patterns pulsing with commitment. "I'm going to synthesize an antidote." Jake tried to respond, but another wave of convulsions racked his body. His skin had taken on a sickly, greenish hue, matching the mist that still hung in the air around them. Time blurred as Ava worked feverishly, extracting fluids from her own body and combining them with various compounds from the medical supplies. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the constant, reassuring glow of Ava's bioluminescence. An eternity seemed to pass before Ava's voice cut through the fog of pain. "Jake, I've got it. This should work." He felt a sharp prick in his arm, followed by a cool sensation spreading through his veins. Gradually, the burning subsided. His vision cleared, revealing Ava's concerned face hovering above him. "Did it work?" Jake croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava's patterns pulsed with relief. "Yes, it's working. Your color is returning to normal." As Jake's strength slowly returned, he became aware of commotion outside the sealed area. Major Chen's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "Cooper, Ava, status report." Jake struggled to his feet with Ava's help. "We're alive," he responded, his voice hoarse. "Ava synthesized an antidote. The bioweapon has been neutralized." There was a pause before Chen replied, "Understood. Hold tight. We're working on safely extracting you." As they waited, Jake's gaze fell on the still unconscious form of Kraz. Without a word, Ava moved to administer the antidote to the Nigerian extremist. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You're saving him?" Ava's patterns flickered with a complex mix of emotions. "We can't let him die, Jake. That's not who we are." As Kraz began to stir, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation across his skin. He looked down, startled to see faint bioluminescent patterns rippling just beneath the surface. "Ava," he said, his voice tight with shock. "What's happening to me?" Ava examined him closely, her large eyes widening. "The bioweapon and my antidote, they must have altered your physiology somehow." Before they could discuss it further, the blast doors began to retract. A team in hazmat suits rushed in, led by Major Chen. As they were ushered out for medical evaluation, Jake caught snippets of reports flowing in from around the base. The attack had been repelled, but the political fallout was just beginning. As they were escorted to the medical bay, Jake's mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. The bioweapon incident, Ava's immunity, his own transformation, each element had the potential to reshape human-Nigerian relations forever. Jake exchanged a glance with Ava, seeing his own mix of uncertainty and hope reflected in her bioluminescent patterns. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As they reached the medical bay, a breathless junior officer approached Major Chen. "Ma'am," he said, his face pale, "we've just received an urgent communication. It's about the Zorth." Chen's expression hardened. "Understood. Cooper, Ava, once you're cleared by medical, report to the briefing room immediately. It seems our troubles are nowhere near the end." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of new responsibilities settling on his shoulders. As he and Ava were led into the medical bay for examination, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. Jake and Ava exchanged a concerned glance as they followed Major Chen to the briefing room. The urgency in the officer's voice regarding the Zorth communication left no doubt that a new crisis was unfolding. As they entered, Colonel Blackwood was already there, his face grim. "Good, you're here," he said, gesturing for them to take seats. "We've received intelligence that the Zorth are making moves to undermine our alliance with the Nigians. They're spreading disinformation and attempting to sway neutral parties against us." Jake leaned forward, his newly acquired bioluminescent patterns pulsing faintly with concern. "What's our response, sir?" "We're sending a diplomatic mission to a neutral space station," Blackwood replied. "Ambassador Zorn will lead the negotiations, but we need you two there as well. Your unique situation," he gestured to Jake's subtle glow, "could be a powerful symbol of human-Nigian cooperation." Over the next few days, Jake and Ava underwent intensive briefings on Zorth culture and negotiation tactics. The pressure was immense, and Jake found himself struggling with more than just the weight of their mission. As they boarded the diplomatic vessel, a sleek craft equipped with advanced stealth technology, Jake stumbled, a wave of pain coursing through his body. Ava caught him, her patterns flashing with worry. "Jake, what's wrong?" she asked, helping him to a seat. He gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control of his limbs. "I don't know. It's like my body is fighting against itself." As they settled into their quarters, Jake's condition worsened. Ava watched helplessly as he writhed in pain, his bioluminescent patterns flaring erratically. Drawing on her knowledge of Nigian biology, Ava's mind raced. "Jake," she said, her voice tight with concern, "I think I know what's happening. Your body is struggling to integrate the Nigian characteristics. You need more genetic material to stabilize the changes." Jake's eyes widened as he understood her implication. "Are you sure?" Ava's patterns pulsed with determination. "No, but it's our best chance. The risk of doing nothing is too great." With a mix of trepidation and trust, Jake nodded. They came together, their bond transcending the physical as they sought to heal Jake's condition. As they connected, their bioluminescent patterns synchronized, creating a soft, pulsating glow that filled the room. In the aftermath, Jake's pain subsided, replaced by a newfound stability. Their patterns continued to glow in unison, a visible manifestation of their deepened connection. As they approached the space station, Ambassador Zorn gathered the team for a final briefing. "Remember," he said, his own patterns serious, "the Zorth are master manipulators. We must present a united front." The delegation disembarked, Jake and Ava flanking Ambassador Zorn and Colonel Blackwood. As they entered the bustling main concourse, Jake's enhanced senses picked up on the tension in the air. Representatives from various species moved about, their conversations hushed and wary. At the far end of the concourse, Jake spotted the Zorth delegation. Their tall, angular forms and metallic skin made them stand out even in the diverse crowd. At their center stood a figure that could only be Ambassador Krell, his presence commanding and intimidating. As the human Nigian team made their way across the concourse, Jake noticed Krell's gaze fix on him and Ava. The Zorth ambassador's eyes narrowed, focusing on their synchronized glow. Before Jake could warn Ava, a group of Zorth officials approached them. "Greetings," one said, his voice a metallic rasp. "We would be honored if you would join us for a cultural exchange." Jake felt a hand on his arm, gently but firmly pulling him away from Ava. He looked to Ambassador Zorn, who gave a subtle nod. Realizing this was part of the diplomatic dance, Jake allowed himself to be led away, discreetly activating a hidden communication device as he went. As the distance between them grew, Jake felt a strange tugging sensation, as if his connection to Ava was being physically stretched. He watched as she too was led away by another group of Zorth, her patterns flickering with barely concealed anxiety. Jake found himself in a small, austere room, surrounded by Zorth officials. Their questions came rapid fire, probing for weaknesses in the human Nigian alliance. Jake answered carefully, mindful of his diplomatic training, but his thoughts were with Ava. Suddenly, Jake picked up a fragment of conversation from the corridor outside. Sabotage the alliance. Provoke war between species. His heart raced. The Zorth's true intentions were worse than they had feared. He needed to get back to Ava and warn the others. Jake stood abruptly, startling his Zorth escorts. "I apologize," he said, forcing a smile, "but I'm feeling unwell. Perhaps we could continue this later?" As the Zorth moved to block his exit, Jake felt a surge of strength course through him. His partially Nigen physiology responded, granting him unexpected agility and power. In a fluid motion, he vaulted over the nearest Zorth, landing gracefully by the door. Alarms blared as Jake raced through the corridors, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with urgency. He could sense Ava nearby, her own patterns calling out to him like a beacon. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with her. "Jake!" she exclaimed, her patterns flashing with relief. "We need to warn the others," Jake said quickly. "The Zorth are planning to—" His words were cut off by the sound of heavy footsteps, approaching from both directions. They were trapped. Jake and Ava pressed close together, their synchronized glow intensifying. As the first Zorth soldiers appeared, weapons raised, an extraordinary thing happened. The energy field created by their bioluminescence expanded, forming a protective bubble around them. The Zorth weapons fired, but the energy bolts dissipated harmlessly against the glowing shield. Jake and Ava stared at each other in amazement, their bond manifesting in ways they never could have imagined. As they stood there surrounded by Zorth forces and protected by their newfound power, Jake realized that this was just the beginning. The fate of the human-Nigean alliance, and perhaps the entire sector, would be decided in the coming confrontation. And at the center of it all stood he and Ava, their improbable union the key to it all. The energy field surrounding Jake and Ava pulsated with increasing intensity, its glow illuminating the dimly lit maintenance sector. Ambassador Krell's metallic face contorted with rage as he activated his personal energy shield, the device humming to life with a low-pitched whine. "You will not interfere with our plans," Krell snarled, his voice echoing off the metal walls as he charged towards the couple. Jake and Ava's bodies moved in perfect synchronization, their newly formed bond allowing them to anticipate each other's movements with uncanny precision. As Krell lunged forward, Jake sidestepped, while Ava ducked under the ambassador's outstretched arm. Their bioluminescent patterns flared in unison, creating a dazzling display that momentarily disoriented the Zorth soldiers advancing behind their leader. The maintenance sector erupted into chaos as the battle unfolded. Jake and Ava weaved through the maze of pipes and control panels, using the terrain to their advantage. Their synchronized movements allowed them to outmaneuver the larger, less agile Zorth forces. As they fought, the energy field generated by their bioluminescence began to interact with the space station's systems. Lights flickered erratically, casting strange shadows across the faces of the combatants. Nearby computer terminals sparked and fizzled, their screens displaying a cascade of error messages and garbled data. Jake caught a glimpse of a security camera, swiveling to track their movement. He realized that their extraordinary battle was being broadcast throughout the station and beyond. A part of him hoped that this display of human Nigean cooperation would sway the neutral parties watching from afar. Suddenly, a searing pain tore through Jake's side as one of Krell's energy blasts found its mark. He stumbled, his vision blurring momentarily. Ava's patterns flashed with alarm as she sensed his pain through their connection. "Jake!" she cried out, her voice imbued with concern and tenacity. As Jake struggled to regain his footing, Ava's protective instincts surged. She felt a familiar warmth spreading through her body, the onset of her recurring condition. But this time, instead of fighting against it, she embraced it. Ava allowed the potent Nigean pheromones to be released into the air around them. The effect on the Zorth soldiers was immediate and dramatic. They began to stumble, their movements becoming uncoordinated and erratic. Some clutched at their heads, while others bumped into each other in confusion. Jake felt the change too. As he inhaled the pheromone-laden air, a surge of strength coursed through his body. His pain receded, replaced by a rush of energy that made his nerves tingle and his muscles twitch with newfound power. But with this enhancement came a struggle for control, his partially Nigen physiology reacting strongly to the compounds. Ava, Jake growled, his voice deeper than usual. I don't know how long I can maintain control. Ava's patterns pulsed with reassurance. Focus on our connection, Jake. Use it to anchor yourself. As they regrouped, the sound of multiple footsteps echoed from the far end of the sector. Captain Drek, the station's seasoned security chief, burst onto the scene with a contingent of neutral species security forces. Stand down, all of you. Drek's authoritative voice boomed through the maintenance sector. The arrival of station security provided Jake and Ava with the opening they needed. With a shared glance, they launched into a coordinated assault on Ambassador Krell. Jake's enhanced strength allowed him to push through the ambassador's energy shield, while Ava's natural agility kept her just out of reach of Krell's desperate counterattacks. In a blur of synchronized movement, Jake and Ava outmaneuvered the Zorth ambassador. Jake landed a powerful blow that sent Krell's weapon skittering across the floor, while Ava swept his legs out from under him. As Krell crashed to the ground, Jake pinned him down, effectively ending the confrontation. Captain Drek and his security team quickly moved in, securing Krell and the disoriented Zorth soldiers. The maintenance sector, which moments ago had been a battlefield, fell into an uneasy quiet broken only by the sounds of restraints being applied and the continued malfunction of nearby systems. As the immediate threat subsided, the adrenaline rush that had sustained Jake began to ebb. The pain from his injury returned full force, and he sagged against a nearby console, his breathing labored. Ava was at his side in an instant, her patterns flickering with worry. We need to get him to the medical bay, Ava insisted, looking at Captain Drek. His physiology is unique. He requires specialized care. Drek nodded, gesturing for two of his officers to assist. Get him to the med bay immediately. And you, he said, turning to Ava, I want you to go with him. Something tells me you're the expert on his condition. As Jake was carefully moved onto a stretcher, Ava never left his side, her patterns pulsing in sync with his labored breathing. The security team began to escort them towards the medical bay, leaving behind the chaos of the maintenance sector. In the wake of the confrontation, Ambassador Zorn and Colonel Blackwood wasted no time in capitalizing on the diplomatic opportunity that had presented itself. They hurried to meet with the representatives of the neutral parties, eager to solidify the alliances that would shape the future of interstellar relations. As Jake and Ava disappeared into the medical bay, the space station buzzed with activity. The images of their unified stand against the Zorth were already spreading across communication channels, igniting discussions and debates throughout known space. The full impact of their actions was yet to be realized, but one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same. The medical bay doors slid open with a soft hiss as Jake was rushed inside on a stretcher, Ava keeping pace beside him. The sterile white environment was a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind in the maintenance sector. Dr. Lena Harper, the station's chief xenobiologist, approached them with swift, purposeful strides. Her sharp eyes quickly assessed Jake's condition as she directed the medical team. Get him into the specialized containment unit, she ordered, her voice calm but authoritative. We need to stabilize his condition and run a full spectrum of tests. As Jake was transferred onto the examination table, Ava moved to follow, but Dr. Harper held up a hand to stop her. I'm sorry, but we need to keep you separated for now, Dr. Harper explained. Your unique physiologies and the energy field you generate together could pose unforeseen risks. Ava's patterns flickered with concern, but she nodded in understanding. Please, take care of him, she said, her eyes never leaving Jake. Jake's vision swam as he fought to stay conscious. He could feel his body changing, adapting in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. The pain from his injury throbbed, but beneath it, he sensed a surge of new sensations. Dr. Harper leaned over him, her face a mask of professional concentration. Jake, can you hear me? I need you to stay awake if you can. We're going to run some scans and start treatment. Jake managed a weak nod, his skin tingling as the medical scanners passed over his body. He turned his head, seeking Ava, and saw her watching anxiously from behind a transparent barrier. Their eyes met, and even separated, Jake felt the comforting pulse of their connection. As the medical team worked, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Captain Drek's voice echoed over the intercom. Attention all personnel. We have detected unauthorized individuals on board. Initiate security protocol Omega-3. All non-essential personnel are to remain in their current locations until further notice. Dr. Harper's brow furrowed as she continued her work, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "We'll be safe here," she assured Jake and Ava. "This medical bay is one of the most secure areas on the station." Hours passed as Jake underwent treatment and a battery of tests. Ava remained nearby, pacing anxiously behind the barrier. As Jake's condition stabilized, Dr. Harper's expression grew increasingly intrigued. "This is remarkable," she murmured, studying the results on her datapad. "Jake, your body is continuing to develop Naigian traits. The bioluminescent patterns on your skin are becoming more pronounced, and your sensory perception is off the charts." Jake sat up slowly, feeling stronger but strange. He looked down at his arms, watching as faint patterns of light danced beneath his skin. "What's happening to me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Harper shook her head in amazement. "It seems your partial Naigian physiology is evolving, adapting. And Ava," she turned to the Naigian woman, "your body is producing higher levels of the compound responsible for your recurring condition. But here's the fascinating part. You're both stabilizing each other." Ava's patterns pulsed with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Your physiologies have formed a symbiotic relationship," Dr. Harper explained. "Jake's human DNA and your Naigian biology are working together, balancing each other out. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." As they absorbed this information, Jake's newly enhanced senses prickled with alarm. He sat up straighter, his eyes darting to the medical bay doors. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I can sense hostility approaching." Dr. Harper frowned, moving to check the security feeds. As she did, the lights in the medical bay flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Emergency backup power kicked in, casting an eerie red glow throughout the room. "We've lost main power and communications," Dr. Harper reported, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Something's interfering with the station's systems." Jake swung his legs off the examination table, his muscles tense. "It's the Zorth," he said with certainty. "They're coming for us." Ava pressed her hands against the barrier separating them. "Jake, we need to get out of here." Dr. Harper shook her head. "We can't. This containment unit is designed to protect the station from potential biohazards. It's locked down tight." A loud thud echoed from the other side of the medical bay doors, followed by the sound of metal groaning under pressure. Jake and Ava's eyes met, their patterns beginning to pulse in unison. "They're breaking through," Jake said, his voice grim. As the Zorth assault on the doors intensified, Jake and Ava's synchronized bioluminescence grew stronger. The energy field around them expanded, filling the containment unit with a pulsating glow. Dr. Harper's eyes widened as she watched her instruments. "The energy you're generating, it's creating localized gravitational anomalies, and these electromagnetic pulses, they're unlike anything I've ever seen." The medical bay doors buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal. Through the gap, Jake caught a glimpse of Zorth commandos, their metallic skin reflecting the red emergency lights. Jake stood, his body tensed for action. Beside him, separated only by the transparent barrier, Ava mirrored his stance. Their patterns blazed with shared drive as they faced the imminent threat. "Whatever happens," Jake said, his eyes locked with Ava's, "we face it together." The containment unit's doors began to spark and smoke as the Zorth assault intensified. Jake and Ava's synchronized glow reached a blinding intensity, their unique bond about to be tested in ways they never imagined. The containment unit's doors gave way with a thunderous crash, and the Zorth commandos poured into the medical bay. In that instant, Jake and Ava's synchronized bioluminescence reached its zenith, bathing the room in a blinding, pulsating light. The energy field surrounding them expanded rapidly, creating a rippling distortion in the air. The Zorth soldiers stumbled, their metallic bodies swaying as if caught in an invisible current. Jake felt a surge of power coursing through his veins, his newly enhanced senses heightened to an almost painful degree. Beside him, Ava's patterns flashed with grit. "Now!" Jake shouted, launching himself at the nearest Zorth commando. His fist connected with the soldier's chest plate, and to his surprise, the metal dented under the impact. Jake's skin tingled, and he watched in amazement as patches of his skin hardened, taking on a scaled appearance reminiscent of Nijin armor. Ava moved with fluid grace, her body twisting and turning to avoid energy blasts. As she fought, her body released a potent burst of pheromones. The effect on the Zorth was immediate. Their coordinated assault faltered, replaced by confused, jerky movements. "Jake! Behind you!" Ava called out, her voice echoing in his mind as clearly as if she had spoken aloud. He spun, ducking under a wild swing from a disoriented Zorth soldier. Jake's hardened skin deflected a glancing blow from an energy weapon, leaving only a slight singe mark where it should have burned through. As they fought, Jake became aware of a strange doubling of his senses. He could feel Ava's movements as if they were his own, their minds linking in a way that defied explanation. Together they moved as one, outmaneuvering the Zorth commandos with uncanny precision. Dr. Harper had taken cover behind a toppled medical cart, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and scientific fascination as she watched the battle unfold. "Incredible," she murmured, tapping furiously on her datapad to record her observations. The fight raged on, Jake and Ava's movements becoming increasingly synchronized. The Zorth, overwhelmed by the couple's enhanced abilities and the disorienting effects of Ava's pheromones, began to falter. Just as Jake pinned the last standing commando against the wall, the medical bay doors slid open once more. Captain Drek burst in, flanked by his security team, their weapons raised. "Stand down!" Drek commanded, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him. Jake released the Zorth soldier, who slumped to the ground, unconscious. The captain's gaze swept over the subdued commandos, then fixed on Jake and Ava, who stood at the center of the chaos, their bodies still glowing with residual energy. "Are you two all right?" Drek asked, holstering his weapon as his team moved to secure the Zorth prisoners. Jake nodded, suddenly aware of the changes in his body. He looked down at his arms, marveling at the armor-like patches that had formed on his skin. "I think so," he said, his voice rough. "But something's different." Dr. Harper emerged from her cover, her datapad clutched tightly to her chest. "Captain, we need to run immediate tests," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "The physiological changes I'm observing are unprecedented." As the security team escorted the captured Zorth commandos out of the medical bay, Dr. Harper ushered Jake and Ava to separate examination tables. She worked quickly, running scans and taking samples, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is remarkable," she muttered, eyes flicking between her instruments and the couple. "Jake, your body is now producing small amounts of the Nijin compound. And Ava, your muscle density and bone structure are showing changes consistent with human physiology." Jake and Ava exchanged glances, a mix of wonder and apprehension passing between them. Their unspoken communication felt stronger than ever, a constant flow of emotions and half-formed thoughts linking their minds. Captain Drek approached, his expression grave. "I hate to interrupt, Doctor, but we have a situation developing. Ambassador Zorn and Colonel Blackwood are calling for an emergency council session to discuss—" He paused, looking at Jake and Ava. "Recent developments." As if on cue, the station's intercom crackled to life. "Attention all personnel," a voice announced. "Unauthorized access detected in Docking Bay 7. Security teams to intercept." Drek's communicator buzzed, and his face darkened as he listened to the report. "Damn," he muttered. "It seems Captain Vex has managed to escape. He hijacked a maintenance vessel." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "He saw what we can do," he said, looking at Ava. "If he gets that information to the wrong people—" Ava nodded, her patterns flickering with concern. "We can't let that happen." Dr. Harper interjected, her voice filled with scarcely controlled excitement. "Before we do anything, you need to see this." She turned her datapad to face them, displaying a complex graph of energy readings. "The spatial distortions created by your energy field. They exhibit properties similar to theoretical, faster-than-light travel mechanisms." The implications of her words hung in the air, momentarily silencing everyone in the room. The potential for revolutionizing interstellar travel was staggering, but so were the dangers if such knowledge fell into the wrong hands. Captain Drek was the first to break the silence. We need to move you both to a more secure location immediately. Until we can assess the full extent of your abilities and the potential threats, your safety is our top priority." As they prepared to leave the medical bay, Jake and Ava's eyes met once more. In that moment, they shared a wordless understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. Their world had changed irrevocably, and the ripples of their transformation were only beginning to spread across the stars. The station's corridors buzzed with activity as they made their way to the secure facility. Rumors of the Zorth attack and the mysterious events in the medical bay had already begun to circulate. Jake could feel the weight of curious and fearful stares from passing crew members and civilians. As they rounded a corner, a group of human and Nigean officials hurried past, engaged in heated debate. Jake caught snippets of their conversation. Words like contamination, evolutionary leap, and diplomatic crisis floated in their wake. Ava's hand found Jake's, their fingers intertwining. Through their touch, he felt a surge of shared purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Two beings caught between worlds, carrying within them the potential to bridge the gap between their species and perhaps reshape the very fabric of space itself. Jake and Ava's shared moment of understanding was abruptly interrupted by the station's intercom crackling to life once more. "All personnel, report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Captain Dreck's communicator buzzed incessantly. He listened intently, his expression growing grimmer by the second. "The situation has escalated," he announced, his voice taut with urgency. "We need to move you two to a secure location immediately." As they hurried through the station's corridors, Jake noticed the increased activity around them. Crew members rushed past, their faces etched with worry and purpose. He could feel the tension radiating from Ava through their newfound connection, her anxiety mingling with his own. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of human and Nigean officials engaged in a heated debate. Jake caught fragments of their conversation. Words like contamination and diplomatic crisis hung in the air, adding to the sense of unease. Dr. Harper, who had insisted on accompanying them, spoke up as they approached a heavily guarded section of the station. "Captain, I've just received word from the governing council. They've reached a decision regarding Jake and Ava's situation." Dreck nodded grimly. "I was afraid of that. What's the verdict?" "They've approved the creation of a joint research outpost," Dr. Harper explained, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It's to be located on a neutral planet, overseen by a diverse committee of scientists and diplomats from multiple species." Jake felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Relief at not being immediately separated from Ava, coupled with anxiety about the unknown future that awaited them. He glanced at Ava, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her luminescent patterns. As they entered a secure conference room, Jake suddenly doubled over, a wave of intense sensation washing over him. His skin tingled and burned, and he watched in fascination and horror as full Nigean-like bioluminescent patterns began to spread across his body. Beside him, Ava gasped, her hands flying to her arms as her muscles visibly shifted and tightened beneath her skin. "Jake," she whispered, her voice strained, "I feel different, stronger." Dr. Harper immediately began scanning them with her medical tricorder, her eyes widening at the readings. "Incredible," she breathed. "Their physiological changes are accelerating at an unprecedented rate. Jake's skin is now exhibiting full Nigean bioluminescence, while Ava's muscle density and stamina are increasing to match human norms." Captain Dreck frowned, concern etching deep lines in his face. "This complicates matters. We need to expedite their transfer to the research outpost before word of these changes spreads further." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Dreck's communicator buzzed again, and he listened intently before cursing under his breath. "We have multiple security breaches. It seems news of your impending relocation has leaked." Jake's enhanced senses prickled with danger. Through his connection with Ava, he could feel her similar state of alertness. "What kind of security breaches?" he asked, already dreading the answer. Dreck's expression hardened. "We've detected unauthorized access in multiple sectors. It appears we're dealing with at least two separate groups, a human extremist faction and a Nigean cult. Both seem intent on claiming you for their own purposes. Dr. Harper gasped. The human extremists. They're likely here for Jake, aren't they? And the Nigean cult is here for me, Ava finished, her patterns pulsing with a mix of fear and persistence. Jake instinctively moved closer to Ava, their hands finding each other. The moment they touched, their mental connections surged, thoughts and emotions flowing between them with startling clarity. Captain Drek was already in motion, issuing rapid-fire orders into his communicator. Listen carefully, he said, turning back to Jake and Ava. I've prepared for this possibility. We have multiple decoy teams in place, each appearing to escort you to different locations. The real transfer will be carried out covertly by my personal squad. As Drek outlined the plan, the station's systems suddenly went haywire. Lights flickered erratically, and Jake felt the artificial gravity fluctuate, causing a moment of dizzying disorientation. The station's systems are malfunctioning, Dr. Harper reported, her fingers flying over a nearby console. Communications are unreliable, and we're seeing unexplained energy fluctuations throughout the station. Drek's face set in dogged perseverance. We move now. Stay close and be prepared for anything. As they exited the conference room, Jake and Ava found themselves in the middle of scarcely controlled chaos. Crew members and civilians alike rushed through the corridors, some seeking safety, others clearly part of Drek's elaborate decoy plan. Jake's newly enhanced vision caught sight of a group moving with too much purpose through the crowd. Their eyes darted suspiciously, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Captain, he whispered urgently, I think I've spotted some of the human extremists. Almost simultaneously, Ava tensed beside him. And there, she said, nodding subtly towards a cluster of Nigeans whose patterns pulsed with an almost fanatical intensity. The cult members. Drek nodded grimly. Stay between us, he ordered, as his security team formed a tight perimeter around Jake and Ava. They moved swiftly through the station, taking circuitous routes and unused maintenance corridors. Jake marveled at how easily he could navigate the dimly lit passages, his bioluminescent skin providing a soft, guiding glow. As they approached a junction, Jake felt a sudden, inexplicable pull. Without thinking, he grabbed Ava's arm, yanking her back just as an energy blast sizzled through the space where she had been standing. Contact! Drek shouted as the corridor erupted into chaos. Human extremists poured in from one side, while Nigean cultists converged from another. Caught in the middle, Jake and Ava found themselves at the center of a three-way battle, with Drek's security team fighting to keep them safe. As energy weapons flashed and bodies collided in close-quarters combat, Jake felt something building within him. His skin began to pulse with an intensity he had never experienced before. Beside him, Ava's eyes widened, her own body responding to some unspoken cue. In that moment of shared instinct, Jake and Ava's abilities merged in a new and unexpected way. Jake's bioluminescence flared outward in a dazzling display, momentarily blinding their attackers. Simultaneously, Ava released a controlled burst of pheromones, causing confusion and disorientation among the fighting factions. The sudden demonstration of their evolving powers gave Drek's team the opening they needed. They pressed forward, clearing a path through the stunned attackers. This way, Drek called, gesturing towards a narrow maintenance shaft. The shuttle is waiting. As Jake and Ava sprinted towards their escape route, the station shuddered violently. A stray energy blast had ruptured a coolant line, causing the temperature in the corridor to plummet rapidly. Ice began to form on the walls and floor, threatening to trap them all. Jake looked at Ava, a wordless understanding passing between them. Together they focused their newfound abilities, creating a localized energy field that generated heat. The ice retreated from their immediate vicinity, allowing them to press forward. Behind them, Jake heard gasps of awe from some of their pursuers. The display of their potential seemed to give even the most fanatical attackers pause, as the implications of what Jake and Ava might be capable of began to sink in. Taking advantage of the momentary lull in the fighting, Drek ushered them into the maintenance shaft. Quickly, he urged, we're almost there. As they emerged near an alternative docking port, Jake saw a small, unmarked shuttle waiting for them. His heart raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. This was it, the moment that would change their lives forever. Just as they were about to board, two figures burst onto the scene, Ambassador Zorn and Colonel Blackwood, looking worse for wear but determined. "Wait," Zorn called out, his voice raw with emotion. "We had to see you off." Blackwood nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can to manage things here. But you two, you're carrying the future with you. Remember that." As Jake and Ava boarded the shuttle, the significance of the moment deeply affected upon them. They were leaving behind everything they had known, venturing into an uncertain future that held both promise and peril. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and as they pulled away from the station, Jake gasped. The space around them seemed to ripple and distort, reacting to their presence in ways that defied explanation. As the stars began to blur with the onset of warp speed, Jake turned to Ava. Their eyes met, and in that instant, their mental connection deepened beyond anything they had experienced before. Images and sensations flooded their shared consciousness, glimpses of possible futures, some filled with wonder, others with danger. One thing became crystal clear as the shuttle carried them into the unknown. Their journey was not nearly finished. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, two beings caught between worlds, carrying within them the potential to reshape the very fabric of the universe. Universe itself. As the shuttle streaked through space, Jake and Ava sat in silence, their minds intertwined, processing the enormity of what lay ahead. Suddenly, the shuttle dropped out of warp, the starfield outside resolving into a view of a verdant planet. Jake leaned forward, his newly enhanced vision picking out details on the surface. "Is that the neutral planet?" he asked, turning to the pilot. Before the pilot could respond, the shuttle's sensors blared to life. "Incoming vessel detected," the computer announced. "Zorth's signature confirmed." Jake's heart raced as he saw Captain Vex's ship rapidly approaching on the screen. Ava's hand found his, their connection surging with shared alarm and perseverance. "They're charging weapons!" the pilot shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. Jake looked at Ava, a wordless understanding passing between them. They stood moving in perfect synchronization to the center of the shuttle. As the first volley of Zorth weapons fire streaked towards them, Jake and Ava raised their hands in unison. A shimmering field of energy burst into existence around the shuttle, deflecting the incoming barrage. The pilot gasped in awe, but his relief was short-lived as alarms began blaring throughout the small craft. "The engines are overloading," he called out, fighting with the controls. "We're going to have to make an emergency landing." Jake and Ava maintained their focus, pouring more energy into the protective field as the shuttle plummeted towards the planet's surface. Through their mental link, they coordinated their efforts, adjusting the field's strength to cushion their descent. The dense jungle canopy rushed up to meet them. With a final surge of power, Jake and Ava expanded the energy field, slowing their fall. The shuttle crashed through the trees, coming to a jarring halt on the forest floor. As the dust settled, Jake and Ava lowered their hands, the protective field dissipating. They looked around, relieved to find themselves and the pilot unharmed. The shuttle, however, was a wreck. "We need to move," Ava said, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with urgency. "Vex will be sending search parties." Jake nodded, his newly heightened senses already picking up distant sounds of pursuit. They helped the shaken pilot out of the shuttle and into the alien jungle. As they moved through the dense vegetation, Jake marveled at how in tune he felt with their surroundings. His skin tingled with each breath of the humid air, and he could sense the life teeming around them. Beside him, Ava moved with newfound strength and grace, her muscles adapting to the terrain with ease. Their mental link deepened as they navigated the unfamiliar landscape. Without speaking, they communicated, sharing observations and warnings. Jake sensed a hidden sinkhole and guided Ava around it. Moments later, Ava's acute hearing picked up the sound of a Zorth search party, allowing them to change course and avoid detection. As they pressed on, the jungle seemed to respond to their presence. Bioluminescent plants began to glow softly, lighting their path. Vines shifted, creating natural bridges over treacherous ravines. Jake and Ava exchanged glances, both sensing that their combined energy was somehow influencing the environment around them. Behind them, they heard the unmistakable sound of Zorth energy weapons discharging. Captain Vex's voice carried through the jungle, barking orders to his troops. The desperation in his tone was clear. This was his last chance to capture the human-Nigian hybrid pair. Jake and Ava picked up their pace, their movements perfectly synchronized. They leapt over fallen logs and ducked under low-hanging branches, their bodies working in harmony. The pilot struggled to keep up, his eyes wide with amazement at their abilities. As they emerged from a particularly dense thicket, Jake and Ava found themselves at the edge of a massive cliff. Below, an alien ocean stretched as far as the eye could see, its waters shimmering with an otherworldly bioluminescence. "We're trapped," the pilot said, his voice trembling as he looked back towards the sounds of approaching Zorth forces. Jake turned to Ava, their eyes meeting. In that moment, their shared consciousness expanded exponentially. Images flooded their minds, visions of a future where their unique bond led to incredible advancements. They saw themselves at the forefront of a new era of interspecies cooperation, their abilities unlocking the secrets of the universe. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Jake and Ava breathless but filled with a sense of purpose. They looked at each other, then at the churning waters below. Without a word, they made their decision. "Wait here," Jake told the pilot. "Help will come soon." Hand in hand, Jake and Ava stepped to the edge of the cliff. Behind them, Captain Vex and his Zorth commandos burst from the jungle, weapons raised. "Stop!" Vex shouted, his eyes wild with desperation. Jake and Ava turned to face him, their bodies beginning to glow with an intense, synchronized light. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in perfect harmony, creating a dazzling display that caused the Zorth to shield their eyes. "This isn't over," Vex snarled, taking a step forward. Jake and Ava simply smiled. Then in one fluid motion, they leapt from the cliff. As they fell, the energy surrounding them intensified. Their hands clasped tightly, Jake and Ava focused all their concentration on the power flowing between them. The air around them began to ripple and distort, space itself seeming to bend in response to their will. Just before they hit the water, there was a blinding flash of light. When it faded, Jake and Ava were gone, leaving behind only a shimmering disturbance in the air where they had been. Captain Vex rushed to the edge of the cliff, staring in disbelief at the empty space where the human-Nigian pair had vanished. As the implications of what he had just witnessed sank in, he slowly lowered his weapon. In that moment, the sound of approaching ships filled the air. Vex looked up to see a fleet of planetary defense vessels descending from the clouds, responding to the shuttle's distress signal. He knew then that his pursuit was over. Miles away, in a sterile laboratory within the research outpost, alarms began to blare. Scientists and diplomats rushed to banks of monitors, their eyes widening at the unprecedented energy readings they were detecting. In the center of the room, a swirling vortex of light began to form. As the assembled crowd watched in awe, two figures emerged from the spatial distortion. Jake and Ava, their bodies still glowing with residual energy. As the vortex closed behind them, Jake and Ava looked at each other, then at the stunned faces surrounding them. They had arrived at their destination, but their journey was just getting started. The true test of their abilities, and the future they had glimpsed, was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.